Camille Baptiste and Minjun Song met at a conference in Chicago. She was presenting a paper on microfinance lending in the Gulf Coast. He was there scouting American fintech partners for his firm's Seoul office. During her Q&A, he asked a question which made her notice him. Afterward, he found her at the coffee station and told her that her data set had a flaw. She told him, just as flatly, that he was wrong, and they connected instantly. He texted her that night for 3 reasons her methodology still held up even with the flaw he'd flagged, and a 4th reason, he wanted to keep arguing about it over dinner before he flew back to New York. She wanted to ignore, but later accepted his invitation. Dinner turned into a walk along the river and turned into 2 years of a relationship. He'd fly down to Atlanta for weekend, or she'd meet him in New York, and once, memorably, they'd overlapped for 6 hours at Newark because his connecting flight and her connecting flight happened to line up, and they'd spent the whole 6 hours in an airport bar. He never talked much about his family. She knew his mother lived in Seoul, his father had died when Minjun was a teenager, and an older brother ran the family business. She pictured something small. When Minjun asked her to Seoul for his cousin's wedding, just family, you'll finally meet everyone. She said yes and packed for a nice hotel wedding in the suburbs. She didn't expect a business class. They upgraded us, Minjun said, taking his seat. They upgraded you, Camille said. I'm the plus one. He smiled, and she knew that he sounded suspicious. 13 hours later they landed in Incheon. A driver in a black suit held a sign that said Minjun Song. Camille filed that away and said nothing. The Song family did not own a dry cleaner. The Song Group was one of the country's largest shipping and logistics conglomerates, built by Minjun's grandfather out of the wreckage of the Korean War, grown over 3 generations until its name sat on shipping containers in half the world's ports. Minjun's brother, Taemin, ran it now. Minjun had spent his 20s trying to be known for something other than his last name. The New York job was distance, a shot at being graded on his own work. He didn't lie to Camille. He just never talked deep about it. In the hotel elevator, a woman about Camille's age looked her up and down and said, "So you're the American professor." Minjun's mother must be thrilled. "Do we know each other?" she asked. "Yuna, Taemin's sister-in-law. You'll meet everyone tonight." She stepped off at the next floor, smiling. Camille called Deja that night, sitting on a bed almost as big as her living room. "Girl, what hotel is this?" Deja squinted at the marble bathroom behind her. "That's not a Marriott. I don't think Minjun's family runs a dry cleaners." "What do you mean?" "I think I might be dating rich." "Define rich." "I don't know yet. That's the problem." She looked it up after Deja hung up, alone at 3 a.m., jet-lagged, phone light the only thing on in the room. The Song Group's Wikipedia page had a market cap in it. A story about a shipbuilding contract with the National Navy. A photo of Minjun's late father shaking hands with the president. She read it twice, then set the phone face down on the nightstand like that would undo it. She found out exactly how rich the next morning. Over breakfast with Minjun's mother, Grace Song, a name she'd chosen decades ago at Wellesley and still wore like armor. Grace was polished, unfailingly polite. She asked Camille questions about her research, interest rates, the population she studied, policy applications, and Camille found herself defending a career like a thesis. At the end of the meal, Grace set down her spoon. "Minjun has never brought anyone to a family wedding. Not once." "I didn't know that." "No," Grace said. "I imagine there's quite a lot you don't know. This family carries weight most people never think about. A country that watches what we do." Minjun spent his whole life trying to be light. He doesn't understand yet that he isn't allowed to be. "And you think I'll make that harder for him?" Grace said to her. "I think you don't know yet whether you're willing to carry weight you didn't ask for. Most people don't, until it's too late to walk away." She stood, straightened her jacket, and left Camille with cold porridge and the first real fear she'd felt since landing. Taemin found Minjun alone on a balcony that afternoon, away from the wedding preparations. "You could have warned her," Taemin said. "I know. Mother's going to test her. You understand that." She tested Julia for 2 years before she decided Julia wasn't enough either. Taemin leaned on the railing next to him. "I didn't get a choice, you know. Nobody sat me down and asked if I wanted the company. It just arrived, the day father died, like a piece of furniture nobody else would take. You got to leave. You got to go be nobody in New York for 10 years. Don't waste it by pretending you're still nobody now that you brought someone home. That's not fair. No, Tamien agreed. None of it is. But you're the one who invited her into a house that was never going to be fair to her. The least you owe her is a warning before she finds out on her own. He flicked Ash over the railing and went back inside, leaving Minjun alone with the parts of the conversation he didn't want to admit were true. Not everyone in the family kept their distance. On the third day, Minjun brought Camille to a smaller, older house at the edge of the estate grounds to meet his grandmother, Minjun Song, 91 years old. The old woman took one look at Camille, said something in Korean that made Minjun laugh, and waved them both to sit. She says you have good posture for someone who's been terrified for 3 days, Minjun translated. Tell her thank you, I think. Minjun Song had lived through the war Minjun's grandfather built the company out of. She'd buried a husband and a son, and outlived most of the people who used to intimidate her, and somewhere in that process, she'd stopped finding wealth as interesting as everyone around her still did. She asked Camille, through Minjun, what her own grandmother had done for work. Camille told her, a seamstress, then a school cafeteria worker, 30 years, 2 kids through college on that salary. Minjun Song nodded like this was the most sensible answer anyone had given her all week. She says, that money skips people who work for it and lands on people who don't, more often than anyone likes to admit. She says your grandmother sounds like she worked for everything she had. She says that's rarer in this family than anyone wants to say out loud. It wasn't a blessing exactly, but it was warmer than anything Grace had offered, and Camille held on to it the rest of the week like a stone in her pocket. The festivities sprawled 4 days across 2 cities. Camille was pulled through dinners, boat trips, and a bachelorette weekend in Busan. On a rented yacht the second night, Camille met the woman everyone had been dancing around, Julia Beck, a corporate attorney who had been with Minjun for 4 years before Camille. Family holding company that did business with the Song Group. Clearly not as moved on, as everyone kept insisting. You're smaller in person, Julia said, holding a champagne flute. Photos make you look taller. I get that a lot, Camille said. She decided she wasn't shrinking for anyone this trip. I'm sure you're very smart, Julia went on. Minjun likes his women smart. It's the staying part he's never been good at. She drifted off, letting the comment land on its own. Later, near the back of the boat, Yuna found Camille alone and dropped the performance. Julia's family needed this wedding to go a certain way, she said, watching the water. There was talk once of her marrying into this family instead of you. It didn't happen. Some people are still mad that it didn't happen. It wasn't an apology for the elevator. It was the closest thing to one Camille was going to get, and she took it. Deja had a video call with Camille and told her. It's not that they think you're not good enough, she said. It's that you're not known. People like that, unknown is dangerous. Doesn't matter what you did with your life. If they can't place your family on a map, you might as well be from Mars. So, what do I do with that? I don't know, baby. But you didn't fly 14 hours to shrink. You could have told me, Camille said. The company, the hotel your family basically owns. The ex who clearly still has feelings. Any of it, any point in the last year. I know. He sat on the edge of the bed, not looking at her. I didn't want you to see me the way everyone here sees me. I wanted to just be a guy you liked. I did like you for that. I still do. That's not the problem. The problem is I got ambushed by your family's whole world for 4 days while you stood there acting surprised every time it happened. You knew what this trip would be, but I didn't. I know, he said. I was scared that if you knew everything, you'd start seeing all of this instead of me. And scared you'd meet my mother and decide none of it was worth it. He looked at her. I don't know how to ask you to carry this without it feeling like too much. You don't get to make that call for me by staying quiet. That's not protecting me. That's protecting yourself from the conversation. I need you to always be honest with me. So he narrated everything about his father's death. The year he watched his brother get groomed for a role Minjun was excused from. The arranged introductions his mother used to set up and how she arranged Julia. How leaving Korea was the only way he'd found to breathe. How meeting Camille felt like the first time he'd been chosen for something other than what he represented, and that was exactly why he'd been afraid to bring her here, the one place that would stop being true. It didn't fix everything, but it was the first fully honest hour since they'd landed, and Camille fell asleep not knowing what she'd decide, only that she finally had the whole picture to decide with. She almost didn't go down for the rehearsal dinner. She went anyway because leaving the room felt like losing. The dinner was smaller than the wedding would be, 40 people instead of 400, and somehow that made it worse because it was less room to disappear into. Taemin gave a toast about his cousin. Yuna gave one that was funnier than Camille expected, and caught Camille's eye afterward. Julia didn't toast. She watched from the second table, and when the room broke into smaller conversations, she crossed to where Camille was standing alone near the windows. "I looked you up," Julia said. "Your research. It's good work." "I wasn't going to say that on the boat." "Why say it now?" "Because I'm tired of being the villain in a story I didn't choose to be in," Julia said. "I loved him for 4 years and his family loved the idea of me for 4 years." She left before Camille could answer. The wedding was at a restored Hanok estate an hour outside Seoul. He proposed to her 2 days later at Gimpo Airport, domestic terminal, waiting on a delayed flight to a coastal town without a ring. He said, "I made this trip harder than it needed to be. I have more to be honest about, probably for the rest of my life, if you're willing to stick around for that. I'm asking if you'll keep choosing the version of me you met in Chicago, now that you've seen the rest." Camille looked at him, a man who'd lied by omission and told the truth by midnight, who came from more money than she could picture and had spent his life trying to be more than that fact. And she said yes. 13-hour flights make a man honest. Eventually, they married in Savannah, not Seoul, a garden with Spanish. Deja as maid of honor, delivering a toast that named every single thing Camille survived that week in Korea, to the great amusement of the Song family members who'd flown over for it. Grace came and was seated on the front row. When the ceremony ended, she was the first person after Deja to hug Camille. "Welcome to the family," Grace said, into Camille's ear. "Thank you," Camille said. Taemin sent a case of wine from a vineyard the family owned outside Seoul, which Minjun said was as close to "I'm happy for you" as his brother had ever gotten with anyone. Yuna sent a photo album of the Busan trip. All the pictures Camille hadn't known were being taken, most of them of her laughing at something just out of frame. Julia sent nothing, and nobody expected her to. Camille kept teaching in Atlanta. Minjun kept his job in New York, mostly, though he flew to Seoul more than he used to, and for the first time in his life, he didn't dread the landing. On the wall of their apartment, next to a photo from Chicago, they hung a small print of the carp pond, not because either of them missed the estate, but because Camille liked being reminded of the exact spot where somebody had finally decided to tell her the truth.